Hello, this is Rocky Marciano. When I was heavyweight champion of the world, they called me the Brockton Blockbuster. You find out why.
Welcome to the Rocky Marciano Archives, a channel dedicated to the life and career of the immortal champion. The following is a collection of 3 tales narrated by Paul Harvey on his iconic radio show, The Rest of the Story, a series that ran nationwide in the U.S. from 1976 until Paul Harvey's passing in 2009 at the age of 90. If you can, sit back, relax, and listen to these short radio classics. We hope you get something out of this.
10-year-old Francis stood on the front steps of his home, his mother in the doorway looking on in horror. "What have they done to my angel?" Mother declared. Little Francis stood there bleeding, streams of tears streaking his face. His lip was swollen, his knee was skinned, his clothing was torn and stained. The neighbor boy had punched him, little Francis sobbed, and the assailant had also stolen his rubber ball. "Didn't I tell you to come right home after school?" the boy's mother admonished. And yet, so pitiful was the child's appearance that the woman quickly brought him into her arms, consoling him, dabbing the bloody lip and wiping away the tears. Francis had never been much of a fighter. He always avoided a scuffle whenever he could, and when a scuffle was inevitable, well, this was usually the outcome. He got the worst of it. But the reason today was different is the rest of the story. You see, the little boy's Uncle John, his mother's younger brother, was already home from work, standing behind the door when Francis came home crying, and Uncle John was not at all happy with what he heard or what he saw when he stepped into the doorway. "Why did you run home to your mother like this?" he told the child sternly. "Can't you fight your own battles?" Mother said, "Shame on you, John," but deep inside, the boy felt that his uncle was right. Sooner or later, he would have to learn to defend himself. But he could not have imagined how much sooner it would be. The next morning, Uncle John called into the shoe factory, said he'd be late for work. He had a very important matter to tend to, and the important matter was the timid little nephew named Francis. And the boy watched, bewildered. Uncle John took an old army duffel bag, stuffed it with sawdust and rags. He took the odd-looking thing out into the backyard and hung it from the branch of a tree. "Now stand over here," he told the youngster, pointing in front of the bag and standing behind him. Uncle John took the boy's skinny arms and thrust them alternately forward. Right, left, right, left, 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 right, right, he barked, and pretty soon little Francis was stabbing his little fists at the old duffel bag. "You see," Uncle John said proudly, "now you can fight. Now don't you come running home anymore." Well, you and I may be a little unhappy with the apparently callous way that the boy's uncle sought to resolve his nephew's problem. But we should consider this. The uncle, since he was a boy, as the result of an accident, had a withered left arm. It was weak, it was mostly useless. And that could explain why he grew so determined that little Francis must make the most of his 2 good arms. And he most certainly did, thenceforth. Starting out there in the backyard, beating away on that old duffel bag. Carefully, meticulously thereafter, further trained by his uncle, the youngster learned not only to dish out punishment, but to defend himself effectively. Although he still, for as long as he lived, did all that he could to avoid a street fight. Even after fighting became a profession. Doubtless you've never heard of a man named John Picciuto. John Picciuto? But you've heard of the man John Picciuto created. His little nephew Francis, the once prototypically 97-pound weakling whom you know as heavyweight boxing champion Rocky Marciano. Ever since Rocco was a little boy, he knew what he wanted to do with his life. He wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. In playground practice, he would make his pals pitch to him for hours. It was the sluggers who made the most money, he told him, so he must learn to be a slugger. All of his heroes were the heavy hitters: Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, DiMaggio, Williams. Their pictures adorned the walls of a clubhouse he shared with his young friends. In his teen years, Rocco continued to work hard toward a baseball career. He played in neighborhood games whenever he could. He thought constantly about hitting and fielding techniques. Such daydreams interfered with school and practically everything else, but Rocco didn't care about that. He was a young man with an obsession, and nothing must stand in his way. In self-styled training, he ran uphill to improve his base running. He even worked out on a set of homemade stretching coils to strengthen his chest and back and arms for batting. A slugger, that's what Rocco was going to be. Rocco's daddy worked in a shoe factory, and occasionally the boy would visit him there, and it grieved Rocco to see his ailing father work so hard. "Don't worry, Pa," the youngster would say. "When I get to the majors, I'll make a lot of money. You'll never have to work again." Of course, it was the power hitters who made the highest salaries, so Rocco grew even more determined to be one of them. Late in March of 1947, Rocco headed for Fayetteville, North Carolina, the training camp of the farm team of the mighty Chicago Cubs. By then, Rocco had already starred in the semi-pros. He was ready to take the big step to the big leagues. The competition would be ferocious, he'd been warned, but Rocco was certain of his destiny to become a great professional baseball player. Even before Rocco arrived in Fayetteville, the going got tough. It was a long trip, and he signed in a day late, strike one. A few days in camp, and his arm started hurting. It was his throwing arm. Suddenly, it lost its snap and made Rocco appear awkward playing defense, strike two. No matter, he thought he was still hitting hard. The manager was looking for sluggers, wasn't he? And yet, unless Rocco could hit it out of the park, he was in trouble. And he was held to a double after a sure triple smash. Or to a single that ought to have been a double because he was simply too big and too slow to be the major league base runner. So Rocco was cut from the team. And that day ended a lifelong dream. A lifelong dream. Since his earliest boyhood recollection, he had wanted to become a pro baseball player more than anything else in the world, and now he was a nobody. It's interesting, his companion on the long trip home was a buddy named Ray Gormley, who was also cut from the roster. And Rocco kept telling Ray that he couldn't go home a failure, that if he couldn't be a slugger in baseball, maybe he could be another kind of slugger, a prize fighter. And Ray could even become his manager. Well, Ray gave Rocco a sympathetic pat on the back. Rocco was depressed and grabbing at straws, he said. What Rocco should do is just go back home, swallow his pride, and return to his real job at the gas company. But Rocco didn't do that. And that's how a fellow named Ray Gormley turned down the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to become the manager of one of the greatest heavyweight champion prize fighters of all time, a heavy hitter named Rocky Marciano, who altered his name to Rocky Marciano.
You know the Rocky story. Rocky was a beyond his prime Italian prize fighter, wanted a shot at the heavyweight crown. Finally, he got his chance. A promoter arranged a bout between Rocky and the big, fast, strong, young, smart heavyweight champion of the world. Rocky did not have the speed and the grace and the savvy of his opponent. Rocky was a plodder, a slugger, dependent almost entirely upon his power and his relentlessness. He would be content if only he could go the distance. And so unfolded the saga before millions of moviegoers all over the world. In fact, it happened twice. It happened once in a motion picture starring Sylvester Stallone, but it happened once before that, for real. Audiences in thousands of theaters worldwide, watching closed-circuit television, witnessed that earlier match on the big screen, January 1970. The real-life Rocky was former heavyweight champ Rocky Marciano, and his opponent, technically stripped of his title, yet widely considered the current king of the ring, was Muhammad Ali. Back then, the most hotly debated question among prize fight aficionados was, which of these two boxing greats was the greater? Well, one winter night, a couple of decades ago, some 16 million screaming spectators learned the rest of the story. The super fight, promoters called it, A fight fan's dream come true to see the real Muhammad Ali and the real Rocky Marciano settle the big question once and for all in a boxing ring. 45-year-old Marciano got in shape as best he could for the big event. He lost 50 pounds in the process, but there was nothing that he could do about the more basic statistics. 5'10 and a half and 184. He was going up against a man 6'3 and 211. Ali had Rocky on reach as well, and by 14 inches, by more than a foot. So it's understandable why in the opening rounds Ali had it pretty much his way. Rocky plowed straight in, swung a lot, missed a lot. Meanwhile, Ali scored, danced away, scored again, drew blood, and then the 10th round, Ali went down. He recovered quickly, but not completely. Had Ali, been able to go the distance, he could have won by a decision. And yet, 57 seconds into the 13th round, theretofore undefeated Muhammad Ali was knocked out. Old-timer Rocky Marciano had won the super fight. But this is the rest of the story. That match, witnessed by millions on closed-circuit television, had been fought the summer previous in a sealed-off television studio in North Miami Beach. Every move both boxers had made had been choreographed, planned, programmed by a computer. The computer had been fed vital statistics, fighting styles, ring records, all of the information it needed to decide what would happen blow by blow should the two fighters have met in a real boxing ring in their primes. Marciano even donned a toupee for the event. 7 different endings were filmed so that not even the boxers themselves knew the outcome. But now you do. Ali saw himself get beaten in a theater. Marciano was killed in a plane crash 3 weeks after the filming of the fight. That's right. The winner of the fight of the century never lived to learn that he had won. And thus did the so-called super fight go down in history as the only prize fight anytime, anywhere, won by a dead man.
Thank you for listening. Join us again next time as we continue to explore the remarkable life of an extraordinary man. Until then, in the words of Rocky himself,
Just remember, keep your left hand high, chin down, and keep punching.
If you like this content, then hit the subscribe button. To really support this channel, consider joining for just over $1 a month and unlock ad-free members-only content. Every member will play a key part in revealing the real Rocky.
As soon as the bell rang, it was a completely different person going out there, and I couldn't explain it except I just enjoyed combat. I just enjoyed the sport that I had learned so well, and I had practiced so much that when the bell rang, I did a job. I could concentrate on the opponent. The fight itself was strictly to prove myself as a fighter. I had to prove that I was a better man.